Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Pete, welcome back. Films and Stuff. We've got a lot to talk about.
We do. It's a little bit of a, let's say, a random episode. It's a little bit of a mishmash or a hodgepodge, if you will.
Crockpot. I like it. Cooking metaphors.
Let's talk about a show, or a movie rather, that came out on Netflix last week that caught both of us by surprise. And that's also, I guess there's a trend that probably Liam Neeson kicked off 10 years ago, but has kind of been gaining steam, which is the older leading actor. Previously, it was just men until this week, but this older leading male actor who was not seen of as, or thought of as, an action star in any way, shape, or form, gets called into a situation where action is required, and you get to see basically a new side of these characters, right? So, or of these actors. So Liam Neeson is there. Keanu Reeves did it with John Wick.
Yep.
You saw Bob Odenkirk do it with Nobody.
Yep.
And I'm sure there's countless others that even I'm not thinking of or saying out off the top of my head. And last week we saw one of the few female-driven ones. So we have seen there have been other female actors who have done action movies, but not as an older actor, right? So when Angelina Jolie does Salt, or when Jennifer Garner does, I can't even remember, not Alias, the movie. There was a movie. It's not super surprising because these are very athletic, very capable actors, and they're not just good actors in terms of emotional and, their ability to emote, but also in terms of their physicality. And last week, Netflix, Lou dropped.
I have to say, when Pete described this movie to me, I think I was 75% sure that he got it wrong, 25% sure that he was joking. Yeah. But 100% I didn't think it was real. It was just I was giving him the benefit of the doubt that he didn't get a full night's sleep and he was somehow mixing everything up. You presented the movie. Hey, you're like, hey, Ethan, did you hear about Lou? And I said, no. He said, it's a new movie on Netflix and it stars that lady from West Wing. I'm like, what? He said, yeah, remember the lady from West Wing? I said, Laura Dern? And he's like, not Laura Dern, the other one. I said, Allison Janney?
Yeah.
He's like, yes. I'm like, I think this is not true. But it is true.
Over the phone, I could see, even though we were on the phone, I could see your jaw drop when you said, what?
I was really confused. Like, are we sure we're talking about the same Allison Janney who played a 50-year-old press secretary at the White House 20 years ago? That Allison Janney is an action star? Okay, I'll take your word for it. And your word turned out to be true. Allison Janney of West Wing fame teams up with Jussie Smollett's sister, Jurnee Smollett, to be a former CIA agent and kick some major ass, right?
It's weird, man.
It's weird.
It's weird, and not because she can't do it. Don't get me wrong. It's just weird because I've known Allison Janney primarily for 2 or 3 big roles. Okay? Mm-hmm. First, of course, West Wing. I think that's really where she entered the national zeitgeist, or maybe even the international zeitgeist, right?
Nice
as
word.
This tall, very attractive, young, but not physically imposing. Yes, tall, but not physically imposing press secretary for the White House. Followed by the next major role I remember her from was a sitcom where she plays a recovering drug addict called Mom, which she did with Anna Faris.
Oh, I do vaguely recall this, yes.
So she, that was the next big thing that I remember her from. And that's not, I don't mean to belittle her credentials in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying personally for me as Pete, those are the 2 biggest roles I specifically remember her from. And then, of course, there were also these great roles. Like, I think she won an Oscar for playing someone's mother. Maybe Tammy? I can't remember. I cannot for the life of me remember which one.
Was she Tanya's mom?
Oh, maybe it was Tanya's mom. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, she was Tanya's mom.
Yeah, so it was Tanya Harding's mother. So these are the kinds of roles I've known her for.
The opposite of a retired CIA agent, by the way.
Yeah, like this deep state CIA operative who was heavily involved in the Iran-Contra situation. I don't know. It just seemed a little weird to me. Not in a bad way, just weird. And then to see her do these very, very action type active role movements, she pulled it off, don't get me wrong, but it just sat a little odd with me.
So I agree with you. I think first things first, I was really remarkably, I give her a lot of credit because I would have never guessed she could have pulled this role off. And she did it in a seriously believable way. I really, really believe that she was able to handle a gun, handle a knife, take a beating, and so forth. Honestly, bravo to her because it's a role I just could not have envisioned her in if I were a casting director. But I think there's something that I needed to separate from this movie, which is her playing the role was exceptional. The plot of this movie was so...
Nah.
Yeah, exactly right. It was so... There's a little girl who's kidnapped. There's a rainstorm. It's almost every little, trick in the book somehow made itself into this movie. And if they would have made it a more believable or dynamic plot, and it would have involved less physical action. I mean, I don't say it because she's an older lady, but she is an older lady, right? She was a CIA operative. She wasn't a MMA fighter. She was probably an analyst. She was in intelligence. I mean, that's not a role where you fight and punch and kick and get stabbed every day, right? So I feel like the fact that she was able to handle a gun and handle herself under surveillance and tracking, absolutely believable. The fact that she's in so many kind of physical confrontations.
Yeah, the fact that she can take down 2 army trained guys in a cabin and then at the end take on a very younger, much more athletically primed guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, there are certain elements of it that you're right. Yeah. Don't have anything to do with Allison Janney. It has everything to do with just the plot of the movie. It just didn't seem right. I think maybe that's also an important distinction to make here is that that's not a knock on Allison Janney. That's just a knock a little bit on the movie.
Yeah.
And there were so many cliches and, we're going to, let's quickly get into it. Spoiler alert. You find out that the kid who gets kidnapped is actually her granddaughter.
Not
the mother who's helping her is her daughter-in-law.
Not a surprise.
And the guy that they're chasing is her son.
Not a surprise.
All of these things are A, a little cliched, and B, also kind of, because they're so cliched, you're just eh. I mean, one of the great things about John Wick, for example, or even Nobody, is that they get pulled into this not out of their own choices, right? It was a circumstantial event that pulls them into this world of, okay, well, I have to pull out my brass knuckles and get on with this again. Not because, someone is specifically targeting them. And that's what makes that nice. The same thing, and forget about John Wick. There's a little bit of element of the mafia and there's connectivity there.
Yeah.
Look at Bob Odenkirk in Nobody.
Yeah.
There was absolutely no real relationship except for the fact that he was a victim or their family was a victim of a home robbery.
A break-in. Yeah.
Yeah. Allison Janney, great in everything she does. This movie itself overall. And then, of course, the very ending cliche where she leaves everything to the daughter-in-law and to the granddaughter, and everyone expects that she's dead.
Yeah.
Nobody, anyone with 2 brain cells could have realized that was obviously going to not be the case because 2 reasons. One, she's the good guy. The good guy rarely, if ever, dies unceremoniously these days.
Yeah.
And 2, this is the cynic in me, but like Hollywood also doesn't want to kill off the main character because, hey, if this movie does well, we got to make a Lou too, right?
Yeah. I have to say, I would have liked this better if, and again, honestly, she pulled it off. I could probably get into this character. But I would have liked it if they would have made her into like the Equalizer. Remember Denzel Washington's role?
Yes, yeah.
Where she's like, hey, I'm retired. I'm under the radar. I don't have to be like an asshole to everybody. But now I'm going to stick up for people that I see are being bullied, that are treated unfairly. And we see her like in a little bit of a vigilante role. And then maybe one time she bites off more than she can chew, right? She starts to say, hey, I'm sticking up for every woman who's been beaten or abused or dumped on a date, right? And she starts to get a little bit too aggressive with this vigilante role. And she goes after like the wrong boyfriend. He's got mob ties. Who happens
to be a military guy or a mob guy. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And now suddenly she's like, oh, now I'm not just getting revenge against people. Now they're coming after me. Right. And then you see kind of like this cat and mouse game. For me, that's a more believable kind of plot, and it's more exciting for me because I have to say, she played the character very, very well, but I couldn't get through the movie because it was just too much thunderstorm and the lightning and the rain and the power's off and the this and the this is just like AI, just wrote this plot themselves. It doesn't have anything creative.
Let's grab the 5 most iconic things from the 5 last movies. Yeah. Let's all put them into one thing and then see if it works, right? Yeah. You're right. It seemed a bit that's why it was cliched. It's like it didn't seem to be organic in that sense.
Let me offer a public service announcement to every bad guy out there. I know I shouldn't be saying this, but I'm just giving free advice. If you've got the character that you want to kill ready to kill them, just kill them.
Just kill them.
We don't need you to recite your Shakespearean last words and rites of blah, blah, blah. And I told you so, and I got you, and now it's all over, and I'm about to do this on the count of 3, and so on and so forth. Like, when I see that...
Monologues are not necessary.
It just goes on and on and on. And that's when I know, like, the writers are kind of like searching for something because they painted themselves into a corner, and that's the only way that they can get out of it.
Yeah.
In any case, for me, to skip to the point, Lou, despite an extraordinary performance from Allison Janney, is a skip.
Right. And I went with saying it's a mooch because it's a show you could probably have on in the background. You're going through your Instagram, you're folding your clothes in front of the TV, and you just need something to occupy your mind. You can't go wrong with it. You can't go right with it either, but you're not gonna cry about it at the end of the day. So I gave it a mooch.
All right. Shall we turn our attention to what else we're watching?
So I spoke to you about this offline, Ethan. We're both watching Andor live, which is to say we're up to date on Andor.
Yep.
And we initially thought we would do an Andor review for today. But I get the feeling that Andor is probably going to be a show that would be better off being done or reviewed or spoken about in bursts. That is to say, you watch 3 episodes or 2 episodes or whatever, and then do an episode about it. So I think one of my comments on episodes 1 through 3 were that it seemed disjointed individually, but the entire, if you take all 3 as one unit, it seemed like one cohesive episode. And I have a sneaking suspicion that's happening here as well for the entire series. This episode, we saw it, and the quick review, if you want to go through that anyway, not much happened.
Well, my good friend Pete, I'm not going to beg to differ with you, but I thought that you're right. Not much really happened, but I thought it was a really interesting window into kind of the pre-Rebel Alliance. To me, as I stand right now, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because you know the lore and the canon much better than I do, but to me, we were introduced to the Rebel Alliance initially in A New Hope, and then we saw further back in Rogue One.
Yeah.
And throughout, even through some of the other series, including the animated series, we've seen a little bit more, like specifically kind of Mon Mothma. But I thought that this episode, which if you're just writing about what happened, nothing really happened. But to me, this kind of seemed like, now I know where the Rebel Alliance came from. Is it correct that the Rebel Alliance is basically Senator Mothma, who's a little bit unhappy with, I guess, the council? I guess there's a Palpatine at this point. I guess the Empire is gathering strength, and she's trying to fight back against this. She's got Luthen Rael, and it seems like it's those two, and she's the money, and he's kind of the muscle, and he's recruited like 7 people, and they're doing this big mission to try to get money, because then they're going to start to recruit some other people and fight back.
Maybe. And that's why I thought this was a little bit, not of a downer episode, but a little bit of an incomplete episode, which is to say you're absolutely right. She talks about wanting to bring in a new benefactor because she's running, either she doesn't have the financial capabilities to do so, or whoever, whatever it is, they don't have the money to do it. Mm-hmm. And she wanted to bring in a new benefactor. I'm pretty sure, in my mind at least, that this new benefactor they're talking about is Bail Organa. It's Leia's dad, Jimmy Smits.
Yeah, you're right.
Because he's definitely a part of the Rebel Alliance, but
he's a senator as well. So they would know
and
each
so
other.
is Mon Mothma. So I think that in terms of motivation, that works in terms of their views are aligned. I got the feeling that there's more to this story, and by story I mean this specific arc within the series, and that's probably going to come over the next episode or maybe even 2 episodes. I don't know what the breakup is. I don't want to go by saying, there's a formula. Every 3 episodes is the equivalent of 1. But definitely this felt like a half episode. And it's so far a very slow burn. They're taking their time with everything. It's not fast moving whatsoever. You learn a little bit more about Luthen. You learn that he's an antiquities dealer, and that's his cover. Mm-hmm. You learn that, you've got these 6 guys who are working together now with Andor to get in and steal the quarterly payment for the salaries of all these Imperial soldiers in that sector. So it's a big amount of money, whatever it is. And what else? You learn that Mon Mothma might be in some kind of bad marriage, but that's kind of it. I mean, for a 50-minute show, not much happened, right?
I mean,
everybody is on edge on the heist planet. Everyone's on edge. No one trusts each other. No one knows that Andor is being paid for this, that he's not really a part of the Rebel Alliance yet.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit there, but is that 50 minutes worth of content? Probably not.
It seems like we're guessing here because we know a little bit how this ends, right? I mean, we saw Rogue One where Cassian is obviously elevated in a...
Yeah, he becomes a captain of the Rebel Alliance.
Yeah. If I'm guessing, it seems like not everybody makes it out of this mission because either Cassian does something very, very heroic, probably, or Vel and some of the other people, die or bail out or, can't stomach it because he's kind of the low man on the totem pole. He's a mercenary. He doesn't even seem particularly anti-Empire right now. Although, to be fair, it's not really clear what the Empire's role is within the galaxy. But, something happens between now and Rogue One where he obviously proves his mettle. He becomes really dedicated to the cause, so much so he's willing to die for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think this is going to be the mission that does it. It's too early, I think. And 24 episodes, I think this is probably a little too early for this being the mission where he's like, okay, I'm in it. I'm in it till I die. Yeah. I don't think that's the case. I think this is probably the mission because right now he's got 6 people who don't trust him or 7 people who don't trust him around him. And everyone's kind of like, oh, you're a bum, you're this, you're that. I think this is the mission that basically proves that he's a capable guy.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think for sure, not everyone is going to survive this, but I think the only reason they're going to survive is because of him.
Yeah, I agree.
That's why I think that there's a lot of ifs, ands, or buts. I think we're going to get a lot more clarity on this mini arc within the series, probably over the next week, maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going for this structure. It could be that they are. It could be that, the director wanted to make an 8-hour-long movie. And they said no. So he said, okay, I'll make 24 episodes and each episode is going to be 50 minutes.
Yeah. I think the way that I'm starting to assess Andor, first of all, I love it. I really love it, but I love it because it's Star Wars without screwing up any of the Star Wars that I know, right? As you said, there's no Ghost Leia so far. There's no Luke, there's no Han, it's not messing anything up in my mind, but it's providing really nice backstory. Yeah, I think if you're not a Star Wars fan, if you haven't seen, the original 3 trilogy and you haven't seen Rogue One, I think this show means nothing to you. It just means nothing. There's not enough action or charisma in order to justify watching this. If you're a Star Wars fan, I think this is must subscribe. I think it's providing great context. Interestingly, and we just said this a few minutes ago with Lou, age means nothing in Hollywood right now. Because Cassian, when was Rogue One made? Again, 6 years.
2016.
6 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And we've said that this is supposedly 5 years prior to Rogue One.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, he's essentially gone back in time 11 years. 11 years. That's right. He's supposed to look 11 years younger than he really is. Age means nothing, right? So, I mean, if you're just going by that, it's a little bit hard to stomach. I mean, he shaved and that's taken a few years off. But overall, I think that's kind of one of the funny things I find about this.
It's interesting because a good friend of mine watched this show at my recommendation. And she said that if it weren't for the fact that I had recommended it, she wanted to turn it off 10 minutes into the first episode. And she said that Cassian Andor is supposed to be a hero. And in the first 10 minutes of the first episode, he's gone to what apparently is a brothel, and then he's killed 2 people. That is not what heroes do in her mind. And so I didn't want to watch it anymore. And I thought that was a really interesting take on this. And then I told her, I was like, listen, that's a really interesting take because for your casual viewer, that's not incorrect. That is absolutely not an incorrect take. In fact, I think I fully appreciate where she's coming from. If you're not a Star Wars hardcore fan, or just even an ancillary fan, you're not going to really appreciate how, even in shows where the good guy is a bad guy, think Dexter, think Breaking Bad, think Better Call Saul, generally speaking, the first few episodes, they make it so that the character, the main guy, is endearing to you one way or another.
Yeah.
And that they justify the bad things they're doing in a reasonable way. Dexter is killing people who are bad guys who have evaded the law, who need to face justice. What's-his-face is making meth in Breaking Bad because... I mean,
he is a chemistry teacher who had a disabled son who is working a second job at a car wash, right?
I have cancer. Yeah. I'm not going to live forever. I need
Correct.
to make sure that my newborn baby girl and my son, both one who's definitely special needs, has enough money to make it through to college, and then they're on their own.
Yeah.
Because that was the way he had always done the math was, all right, I'm going to make X number of pounds of meth because that's how much it's going to sell for. And then I can give that all to my wife. And then I never have to do this again. And then if I die, my kids and my wife are taken care of.
I mean, you make a very good point, and I'm sure someone's written about this, but if they have not, then I'm the first person to say it. At some point, we have a very politicized world. It's hard not to look at Star Wars and the Rebel Alliance strictly through like a political lens and question whether or not the rebels are really the good guys. I mean, as your friend said, when you look at it now, there's nothing really admirable about what the rebels are doing, right? I mean, we have relative peace in the universe. We have a democratic Senate, which of course has its problems, just like any other democracy. We have the Empire that's obviously trying to take over. The Empire, I think, is heavy-handed for certain, but they don't seem to be they don't seem to be portrayed as unfair or slavinous, right?
Yeah.
They just seem to be power hungry, saying, hey, we're going to put in order. This is the way that things are going to be. It's not going to be a democracy. It may not really be fun, but they don't necessarily seem to be unfair. And the rebels right now, even though you and I grew up with, the rebels are the good guys and it's the evil empire who are the bad guys, right? We don't really see yet the rebels being good, and we definitely don't see the evil that they're trying to overcome. Even when you look at Cyril Karn, right? This overeager guy who like customized his uniform. I mean, he definitely seemed to be like, he didn't seem like to be the guy that you'd like at the office, but he wasn't wrong. He's like, hey, 2 of my coworkers were killed. We need to look into this and understand what happened, right? Fine, they were in a brothel. Fine, they weren't really great guys. They were still killed. Let's look into it, He's not necessarily wrong in this whole thing. And I imagine that him and this other lady, Dedra Miro, right?
Yeah.
That they're going to somehow find this.
There's going to be more of them for sure.
Yeah.
Even though they were both kind of summarily slapped down in this episode, I imagine that their story isn't over.
Yeah. And I think that's a hard thing is we need to look at Star Wars in a vacuum and not apply it to real life. If you apply it to real life, it's going to be really difficult when you're going to start to look at bureaucracy and heavy-handedness and right and wrong. But your friend is right. When you just kind of look at the rebels now, you don't really get a sense of, hey, I really want them to win. They're the good guys. Right now, they're not. They're just a collection of kind of like criminals who, at least in the case of Cassian, are being paid to steal something. They're stealing salary. Whether they're stealing salary for people that are, there's no good or bad. They're stealing someone's salary, right? I mean, they're not doing something good. It may be for a good cause eventually, but I agree with your friend. It's not easy to immediately like cheer for them saying, yeah, steal the salary. Well, why? We need to see the hook right now, what they're fighting.
Which I'm certain we will. But I'm just saying that the only reason that we, as in you and I, have been okay with it, and I think a lot of the fans have been okay with it so far, is because, how we know the story of Star Wars, right? We know what happened in episode 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's the only reason. So in any case, I thought that was an interesting counterpoint to, something that's... It's important to provide context, as you've always said, and it's the right thing to do is to provide context. Yeah. At least at this stage of the Empire's birth, we don't really see why, or the lay person wouldn't see necessarily why the Empire is so bad.
I agree. Maybe we will.
Hopefully we will. All right, so that is Andor. Anything else we are seeing or anything else that's been on your radar?
I know that we talked about when you saw Confess Fletch. I still have to see that. You said that you've watched the greatest beer run ever on Apple TV Plus.
That's right. It came out yesterday. It was great. I really enjoyed it. It's a mooch for me. I have heard of this story. The premise is super simple. A civilian in the U.S. sneaks into Vietnam during the Vietnam War so that he can deliver his buddies from his neighborhood cases of beer.
How many? Like, he brings the beer with him?
You see him take 4 cases in the thing. And like, of course, it's, that's just he obviously is not, we don't know what the actual numbers are. No one's keeping track. But like every time he opens his bag, there's always a beer for someone in there.
Oh, good for him. What else do we have on our list that we want to see?
So I am very much looking forward to seeing Operation Fortune. That has been delayed indefinitely. It's Guy Ritchie's latest movie. I am a fan of Guy Ritchie.
Yeah.
It's usually quite funny. The action is quite good. So that's a good thing. I'm interested. It got delayed because the primary bad guys in the movie were depicted initially as Ukrainians.
Yep.
And given what's going on in Europe right now, Hollywood and I guess Guy Ritchie felt that it would be inappropriate to release a movie where the Ukrainians were depicted as bad guys. So they have decided to pull it off and re-edit it. I don't know what that means, but that's what they're doing. Beyond that, very soon we've got Knives Out 2 called Glass Onion.
Oh, yeah. Tell me I've never watched a Knives Out movie. Can you believe it?
If you like mysteries, if you like murder mysteries and whodunits, this is the movie for you.
Oh, really?
Think of it as a more realistic and a more grounded and a more modern version of Agatha Christie's Poirot series. It is phenomenal. So don't think of Poirot like, Death on the Nile and Murder on the Orient Express. Those were a little over the top in their depiction. But in Knives Out, an A-plus list cast.
Yeah, the cast is amazing.
The cast is unbelievable in Knives Out. And then in the sequel, they're doing the same thing. Also an excellent cast. I cannot recommend this enough. If you like murder mysteries, this is the one to watch.
All right. I'm in on that. What about something you and I both love? Mythic Quest Season 3 on Apple TV Plus. When is this coming out?
I think it comes out actually mid-November. If I remember correctly, I don't have the dates confirmed, but I read somewhere it's coming out on the 11th of November. Okay. I could be wrong. And that is definitely, of course, it's a series. It's hilarious. It's one of the few, it's not a sitcom, but it's very funny. Yep. It gives you great insight on how the video game industry works if it were run by delusional people, which I imagine is true. I'm very keen on seeing it.
Okay. The other 2 trailers that I've seen that I've put as mandatory for me is The Peripheral on Amazon Prime with Chloe St. Moretz, Secret Invasion, which is Marvel. That's
right. So what's interesting is I'm actually more interested by The Peripheral, which is a movie, than I am in Secret Invasion, which is a TV series, hilariously enough. Oh. And even though I'm a huge Marvel stan, I love them. I wish them all the best. But so as I was telling you earlier, a couple of things. One, I'm not so sure. I don't know how they're going to do the pacing for the TV series. I think this might be better as a movie than as an 8 or 10 episode TV series. And 2, I think She-Hulk has left such a bad taste in my mouth that at the moment I need to take a break from Marvel.
I mean, I have to say, this is not a small thing. I mean, Pete, you and I have been we're huge fans. And for you to, I quit She-Hulk. I quit after 1.5, maximum a half episodes. If I were Disney, not that I'm so impressive, but I would be sounding the alarms with whoa, hold on. Why aren't we getting any streaming from Ethan? Why isn't Ethan watching this? And now Pete is saying he hates this show. We have done something dramatically wrong if those 2 core guys are saying they do not like this show at all.
I think that's exactly the right point. I think that's exactly the right point, is that, Marvel and Disney can easily dismiss and should easily dismiss those people who are saying, oh, it's the anti-woke brigade, blah, 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 who are saying that, I don't want to see this. It's not good because there's a woman as a lead or because of this or that. Those are people who are kind of using the argument of the show being woke to mean anti-progressive. Like they're anti-progressive. And that's fine. You can ignore those people all day because at the end of the day, the world is the way the world is. And it's going to continue being that way regardless of how, this small, very vocal minority is.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is when you have real hardcore fans of your product, like me, like you, and when you start losing them, and this has nothing to do with, any of the progressive issues or any of the woke issues. This has nothing to do with that. It comes down to
it's a bad show.
Exactly. It comes down to quality. It's a fundamental issue of quality. And I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't think that it doesn't have your traditional Marvel feel. I like that they tried to make a sitcom. That for me is great because that's one of the hallmarks of what Marvel has done in, I think, third or fourth phase onwards is to say, hey, let's make movies that are different genres, right? So Doctor Strange 2 had a little bit of a horror vibe in there. Ant-Man was like a heist movie at the core. You know what I mean? So fine. That's great. And Marvel in general has been very good about injecting humor in all their movies on average. But this, I feel like a lot of the humor is forced. I feel like a lot of the humor is very low-hanging fruit. It's not intelligent. It's not funny.
You're right. I agree. I don't think, I'm with you on the fact that it makes sense. And I really appreciate this, Disney. You're like, hey, we've already got Pete and Ethan. We don't need to, pander to them and put all these Easter eggs that no one else is going to get. Let's try to expand our audience. Let's try to do something different. I respect that as a decision. It's not my decision, but I understand it from a business perspective.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you're going to do that, make a good show. You can make a very good show that I don't like, but at least I say, hey, that's a pretty good show. It's not my style, but it's a good show. Problem here is that I don't find that there's anyone who's like, I love She-Hulk. So funny. Love the character. So inspiring. I don't feel like there's anyone who's saying that. They've alienated the MCU fans, but they haven't gone out and they haven't recruited anyone else who's really supportive of this show. It hasn't done anything. It's not funny. It's not clever. The character is not empowering or, aspirational, I should say.
And I had the opportunity. I haven't seen it, but I heard in one of the last few episodes that She-Hulk was supposed to, she was in contention for in the show was in contention for winning Lawyer of the Year or something like that. She hasn't been in a courtroom in any of the episodes. I did a quick recap to see what she's done in terms of the law. We haven't seen her in the courtroom in any of them.
Yeah.
So I don't understand. If you want her to be a superpowered hero who's an amazing lawyer, put her in a courtroom. Let us see what she's doing legally. We haven't seen any of that.
I think that's the problem, which is you can't expect to, if the goal is to say, hey, we're having this female professional lawyer, she should be empowering and inspiring and all these other positive things. I support that completely.
Admirable. Right? Yeah.
But then you're talking about a hardcore drama. You're talking about, West Wing or whatever that news show was or something like that. You cannot talk about having a character who's empowering and inspiring, but make them silly and fluffy at the same time. That doesn't work.
The quote unquote funniest legal drama I ever saw, or I can think of that comes to mind, is something like Boston Legal. And that was a drama first with moments of hilarity and levity interspersed. I can't think of a sitcom that's a legal showing of any kind.
And also those characters are intended to be quirky. They're not intended to be
Yes,
inspiring.
Correct. That's actually
Right?
a great point. Yes.
Right? I know Boston Legal, right? Remember, what's the guy from the Black Hat?
Danny
who's
Crane.
Yeah, right?
James Spader is there.
Right? No one was looking at James Spader or
Shatner.
William Shatner. No one was looking at them and saying, oh, they've inspired me to go get a law degree. They've inspired me that I can be a lawyer. They're saying, ha ha ha, they're so quirky and weird. I love how weird they are. You know, it's a different perspective. Anyway, I think we've said enough about how did we get on this? We started talking about
Secret Invasion. Yes, that's right.
Anyway, I want to see Secret Invasion. It's on my must-watch
No, and I
list.
will too. Don't get me wrong. I mean, for all their faults in the last couple of outings, Marvel still has me by the short hair. So, and then there's a bunch of other things which, you know what we'll do is we'll probably put up an Instagram post or maybe even a Twitter post about a thing where we can kind of just say, hey, look, these are the shows that we're looking forward to. But if there's any shows that you're specifically looking forward to or any movies that you're desperate to see, why don't you send us a tweet at FNS Podcast, or why don't you leave us an email at aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com, or why don't you leave us a comment on the bottom of this video? Let us know what you think. We are happy to look at the trailers. We've got a list. We always want to add on to it.
Hold on. There are some terms and conditions here. I do not watch horror. I'm not going to watch anything scary.
Fair enough.
Some conditions may apply. I'm not going to watch anything scary. I'm not going to watch anything where, what was this trailer by M. Night we saw? It's called Knock at the Cabin. No way. I'm not going to see this.
I will. I like M. Night Shyamalan movies. They're not great, but I don't mind watching them because sometimes the twist is great.
I'm not going to see anything scary. I don't like torture. I don't like horror. I prefer no stabbing, but
all right. So nobody send us the trailers for Saw 16 or whatever they're at now.
I mean, when I saw Saw 1, I think it like ruined my week. I think I don't know why you're laughing. Like, I feel like that whole week I was just like comatose. Like I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't think. I couldn't sleep. I was like afraid to be by myself. It was harrowing experience.
I knew that's what would have happened to me, so I didn't even bother watching it.
I'm telling you, my friend Towner French, I hope you're listening. You really screwed up my week by forcing me to watch that movie. And I don't know why you didn't tell me it was a horror movie. It really messed me up.
Yeah, so please, no scary trailers. We're both wimps that way, and we're fine with it.
Yes.
And conversely, if you've got a great romantic comedy, I mean, I don't want to admit it in public, but I'll do it. I am actually a sucker for a hilarious romantic comedy.
Same. We're a lost art.
All right.
Listeners and Pete, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your contributions. Check out our YouTube channel and catch up with us next episode.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day. Bye, Pete.
Bye, Ethan.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.